2, 1, action.
My grandfather told me a story about carrying a message on the Western Front in 1917. He was a small man and he was very fast, and his job was often to carry messages from post to post. But that kernel of an idea sat with me, and I was always fascinated by the war, perhaps because my grandfather told me about it when I was very young, 9, 10, 11. Perhaps because at that stage in my life, I'm not sure I'd ever even heard of a war. You know, one of the things we take for granted is we in the West, at least in England, are born in peacetime. Unless you're now in your mid-60s, 70s, you were not born during a war, and you have not known a war on this scale. So for me, it was an eye-opening. I couldn't believe that the man that I knew, this very loquacious, charming, theatrical, funny, chatty storyteller of a man, had this horrific experience as a young man. Fundamentally, it's a very simple story. Two men have about 8 hours to get from one part of the Western Front in 1917, in the middle of the First World War, to another. If they do it, they will save the lives of 1,600 men, including one of those men's brothers. If they don't, then not only will his brother die, but those other men are likely to be doomed. And in that respect, it's a ticking clock thriller. What I wanted an audience to do was, through the micro of these two men's journeys in real time, just 2 hours of real time, observe to some degree the macro, which is the immensity of the destruction, the vastness of the land, the thousands and thousands, millions of men, the appalling conditions, the staggering amount of waste and destruction, lives lost. And yet always to stick within the footprint of this 2 hours of real time. And I felt like if you were to look, it's like looking through a tiny, tiny keyhole into an enormous panorama of horror.
They're walking into a trap. Your orders are to deliver a message, calling off tomorrow morning's attack. If you fail, it will be a massacre.
The hilltop towns and the small towns and villages of northern France were all utterly razed to the ground during the Great War. And now when you go to visit the sites of those battles, you're very struck by how the villages and towns have all been built in the middle of the 20th century. Nothing, what I would call, period, remains. So what Dennis was doing in part was constructing a lost world, was constructing a world that had now been destroyed entirely.
If you don't get there in time, we will lose 1,600 men. Your brother among them. Good luck.